So the first thing that we need is a container for our candles. I had these tuna cans and I'm just taking the lids off of them. They usually spin off pretty easy. Then you want to take the paper off of it and clean it up really good. It takes a couple minutes running it under hot water. The paper will come right off. It's not too difficult, but you want to make sure that they are clean on the inside and the out and the paper is taken off. After your cans are clean, you're going to notice that there is a spot of glue where they've attached the label to it. You can get this off just by using some Goo Gone. You want to spray it normally. My sprayer isn't working, so I had to pour it on the side of it. But you'll pour it on there and just let it sit for about 5 minutes. Once you've let your can sit for a couple of minutes, you just grab a sponge and kind of scrub the glue off. It should come right off. If it doesn't come off, use some hot water and that'll help it. When you get the glue off, you definitely want to wash your can with some soap and water, because the Goo Gone is kind of leaves an oily residue on there, and if you decide that you want to paint it, or if you decide you want to put your decorative label on there with Mod Podge, it won't stick. But you can see here how clean that can came with just some Goo Gone and some water. Next, take a towel and dry all the water out of the outside and inside of your cans. So our next step is to decorate. I have this one can that I made a couple weeks ago. I haven't filled it yet, but I'm using that as a guide, so I'm measuring it. And then I have these bags that I had left over from my Mother's Day presents. I thought they were really pretty, so I decided to save them. What I'm doing right here is I'm going to cut the bottom out of it, and this way I can lay it flat and I'll be able to mark my measurement lines on the back. So if you know me, you know I never do anything straight. So here I am having to go back and cut the jagged edges off the bottom of the bag. Hopefully you're a little bit better with scissors than I am, and you could probably skip this step. So once you've got a fairly straight edge to work with on your bag or paper or whatever you're using, you need to mark some measurement lines on the back side of it so that when you flip it over to your pretty side, you won't be able to see those. Okay, after you have your marks, you need to get a straight edge. I usually use a ruler, but I couldn't find it, so I'm using this block of wood that I have left over just to mark my cut lines so that when I go to cut it, I have a guide. Your next step is to kind of dry fit it over your can. I cut my bag in half and I was able to make 2 strips that will fit perfectly on 2 cans. So I got pretty lucky there. So here I am dry fitting it a third time on the actual can that I'm going to be attaching this to, and I realized that I had a little bit on the bottom that hung over, so I wanted to go ahead and cut that back off. So after a couple of tries of cutting and remeasuring, I finally got my size of my paper to where I'm happy with it. And then I'm going to put it on my can. So what I want to do here is add a line of hot glue on the outside surface of my can. And then I'm going to take my paper, run it all the way to the end of that line, hold it down for just a second, and then I'm going to wrap it around the outside of the can pretty tightly so there's no bubbles and my edges meet up. And I'm going to add a little bit more hot glue here. I put too much. You don't want to use that much. You just want it to be at the edge of your paper. Hold that down for a second so that it'll stay. And your can or your candle holder is now decorated and it looks really pretty. So after you get your cans decorated, your next step is going to be to put in your wicks. I bought these at Hobby Lobby for probably $3, and you want to open up your package and just kind of center them down in the center of your cans. Right now we're just placing them and we will hot glue them in once we get them where we want them to be. Okay, so now we are actually going to get to where we are measuring and melting our wax. I'm going to use my old kitchen scale which doesn't work correctly. Every time I use it, I have to take the table off and zero it out, and then I can put a container on it to hold my wax, and then you want to re-zero it after you get the container on there. And I am going to be using some beeswax that I harvested from my hives when I was getting honey. I just melt it down every year so that I can use it when I need to. The recipe that I use for my candles calls for a pound of beeswax to a half a cup of coconut oil. I'm going to cut that in half, so I'm going to be using half a pound of beeswax to a quarter of a cup of coconut oil. After we have everything measured, we are ready to melt it. You can use a double boiler for this, but I have an old candy pot that I use because once you melt beeswax, whatever you melt it in is pretty much ruined. So I use this over and over again, and I just use it to melt waxes. So you want to have pieces that are small enough to fit into whatever container that you're melting it in. As you see, I had to break up some of mine because it was too big. It takes about, I would say, it took me about an hour to melt down my beeswax in my candy pot. After we have our wax melted, we're going to go ahead and put in some coconut oil. I just bought this from Walmart, and I don't have a lot left in the jar, so I'm not really measuring it. I'm just putting the rest of it in. Also, when you put in your coconut oil, you're going to be ready to add your essential oils. I put in about 30-40 drops of tangerine oil to make this. Somehow or other, I did not videotape me pouring it, but it's just basic. You don't really need to know how to pour it. Just make sure you don't burn yourself. I filled mine about 3/4 of the way full, and then I'm going to set it to the side and let it cool off, and then I'm going to cut down my wicks to size. So I want to thank everybody for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. I know that I enjoyed making it. Thanks.